right, good morning. Let's get started with our economic outlook. All right, so today we have the core CPI. We did see some sell-off in correspondence with that event. So I'll take a look at that in a minute. Check out the power range. We are trading currently below the power range, which is for the session today. We got a high of 14,883 3/4 with a low of 14,868. When I posted this, we were trading, it was long, up 0.31%, and shortly after, that's when we had that sell-off with a volume of 53K and the ATR at 169. All right, so we can see here in line with that core CPI event, we had a massive sell-off that came in, completely taking us into new session lows, all the way down to PR -4, from up PR +4, pretty much. And we are continuing to we are holding that position right now. Let's take a quick look at the rest of the market, get the futures market pulse. So we're saying the same thing with the S&P, with ES, YM, and RTY. Not so much with YM. It actually kind of looks normal with YM, where we were already trading bearish of the power range. I already had that bearish price action structure forming before that sell-off, and it's retracing that at this moment. So that's pretty much just an overview of the market pulse. So you can go ahead.
Perfect. So let's just pick right up where we are within Q. So CPI data comes out. We get an offer that comes in the market on time, 7:30, and that spreads and slides our price all the way down to 795. Looking at it from that's on the institution in Q print. So our buyer, our passive buyer who's supporting the market right now, has a liquidity pool of where I would be seeing buyers, position a high 814.50 down all the way to 795, which is where our passive buyer is sitting. And at the moment, and before the open, we're just seeing our buyer and seller also could be one single entity playing with price in between. So what we're just watching is we've got a buyer passively holding price where it is now after a huge amount of selling came in after the CPI news. Now we're also too, if you're looking at it from a more zoomed out, not necessarily watching the order flow tick for tick, but that that aggressive sell off that came in, they've stopped selling. So because they've stopped selling, they pulled from the offer. Our buyers able to, with volume declining, push us up to where we are now, 839.50, 840.25, as they're hitting the bid, and we've got buy orders coming into the market and delta climbing on both the institution and Q side. So we've just got an increase in volume ahead of the open as buying is accumulating. Our buyers at 837, so once they showed up, quite a bit of participation followed suit and able to push price, 10 points. It gives you also degrees of awareness as to how far or how much our seller has backed off, depending upon what lens you look through to gauge and monitor that effect. So new minute started. With that new minute, 13, 14 seconds into it, 400 contracts have traded on the retail side MNQ. Typically, I'm narrating what's happening there more so because that's where more of the data is coming from. And as that data is flowing in, I'll then look at what they're doing on NQ, the institution side, if it's supporting that or if we've got someone sitting on the opposite end. Because price is being held up right now as there's a passive seller absorbing us from continuing higher, as most of the orders that have been transacted, about 840 within this last minute, are to the buy side. Our sellers at 46 and a quarter, they're being pushed up, and boom. So we just had a huge buy order come in. That was like 600 contracts. Just popped right through the seller, moved to 51. So the momentum has certainly shifted as the buyers are accumulating, and it wouldn't be surprised if we get a full retrace of that move. I mean, that's how the game is played.
Yep.
Lots of buyers are piling in now on both sides as we've got an increase in participation coming in on both sides. The momentum is increasing. Also to note, it looks like on NQ, we're at the VWAP. We just got a touch of it, and we're retracing off of it.
Yep. Just about to mention that.
So from a market maker standpoint, holding the predator program, because from my perspective, that's just how this market is these days. It's the wild, wild west. This is the arena, the modern day gladiator arena right here. We've just got a huge accumulation of volume on both sides, completely one-sided. If there's not orders to follow that, it'd be a great opportunity to squeeze the hell out of those buyers who came in off of that move. Let's see if that happens. We've still got 30 seconds left before this prints. Already we're seeing the buyers get absorbed a bit. Offers at 57, move to 56. Slight fight battle happening. 56. Sellers still there at 56. We're seeing price fight again back at 56. Being absorbed, so our offer's sitting there. Let's see how they respond after this prints. There's the print. Sellers at 56. Not a lot of momentum off that move, so again it leads to possibly someone seeing what I was speaking about as an opportunity printed on the chart. So already we're starting to see price go the opposite way. We're seeing delta reflect that. There is a passive buyer absorbing a lot of the selling volume that's coming in. Our buyers now move to 53. So seller at 56, buyers at 53.
This is also at a location where I'm typically looking for a trend reversal. It's based off my power range levels. So it's getting held up right at that same VWAP level, and I have a lot of things converging in at that same level.
And don't forget the VWAP's right there on NQ at 59.34. It's moving,
Yep.
by the ticks, but it's right up there. So again, as I was speaking before, there's this move where we're seeing prices go lower. Our seller is accumulating to the downside with offer sell positions on both markets. Very light volume though. Our buyer is still maintaining price, supporting price. They've now moved to 54. Still in between 56. So offers at 56, buyers just maintaining and absorbing the selling that's coming in off of that move. Still holding 54. So we've got a minute to the open now. 56 is being tested. So our seller's still hanging out there. We've come back to 54. So we're ping-ponging back and forth, 30 seconds before the open. One thing to note that's taking place within this minute is our buyer has been absorbing a lot of selling that's been coming in. So there's someone on both sides right now, and they're observing the flow. They saw what they needed to see. We got a buy order that came in. It hit a node that we have at 61. Also, our VWAP is at 59, so there's a bit of mechanical resistance up above. Seller at 60, price now 53. It doesn't appear that our passive offer has moved, and our buyer is still holding 53. Our buyer's now at 53. We're going for that test of that node at 61. Offers moved to 60. Huge amount of buying volumes coming in now to push. Followed by that, you could see kind of like it happened so quickly, but participation followed that move. So huge, if you can imagine, boom, huge buyer comes in, several hundred contracts, followed by just orders following that move, and then someone sitting on the top absorbing and eating all that liquidity, and that brings us to price now, offer at 62 3/4.
Key level I'm watching above that is 884. We got I have a node up there and also the 200 SMA.
Okay. Let's take a look at the 1 hour too. We got a lot of space.
Yep.
Again, it looks like the program at the moment is all of that selling that came in after the CPI. It's being squeezed if you're a seller. Lots of volume coming in to the buy side. On the retail side, the institution side is not as heavy. It looks like the flow is being controlled over on MNQ. For buying, sellers all the way still at 62 3/4. I anticipate they'll move once we get volume to show up in the 77 range. 80 now is the price, so a lot of selling's underwater as a lot of buying volume is FOMOing into this move. Alright, so that's printed. Immediately within the next, like that's what's 3.3 seconds here. You see about 600 contacts go short, which our buyer quickly absorbed. So really we're anticipating the response of the seller to this buyer that just came in with that volume. So they're going to continue to accumulate it. So far they've pulled their liquidity and we're seeing sellers jump into it as they're accumulating on both sides. There's a node down below us from where that buyer put in most of their volume, 62 3/4. But they're stepping in front of that at 69 1/4. And we're seeing the selling that took that bait off of that move down start to be a bit squeezed as our buyer now moves to 75.
I got in early on that selling that came in at the top of it.
still selling, but our buyers here, they're still at 75, just judging by the price moving back and forth. Well, I'm not going to put my opinion into that one, but we've got an offer accumulating, and they're getting heavier with it. Our sellers now at 75. They're accumulating into the short side. They're trying to get to the note. They touched the note here, 63 and 3/4, where our buyer was sitting based on that previous move. They're protecting it. The moment we touched that, we saw a massive spike off of it. So they're needing to shoot a lot of size into that level before we get a breakdown of it. And they're continually hitting it with supply to push lower. So that move that we just saw from the bid got completely reversed. Both sides have completely left that move, and as they've left that move, we're starting to see a buyer come in and eat up the liquidity to the short side. And it looks like they're coming back in to protect their move on the note of 63 and 3/4. They're trying to get up there. So this buyer is pretty passively, from my perspective, holding the fact that the market just completely flipped in terms of their positioning from the open to the response, and they're still holding the bid. So now we're looking at a lot of sellers that have taken the bait on that move down that we just saw.
Yeah.
Now
Back
we're
to
seeing price move up.
right back to VWAP, and when we saying that reaction to the VWAP.
Exactly, bouncing off of VWAP. Now there's a note up above that came in with that offer that we just saw. 75 is the resistance, 75 and a quarter. So I'd be looking to see if our buyer just smashes through that easily, or if there's a fight there. Already there's a battle taking place at 67. 67 and a quarter, where that we've got an offer sitting, not in allowing our buyer to get any higher. Back at the VWAP. Boom. Push off of the VWAP. Back down to the VWAP. Slight push off. Buying is being absorbed. Back into the selling. Both markets have flipped to the selling. Let's see how our buyer's going to respond to this. There's a point of control at 54. They could use a support.
Interestingly, I got a point of control at 63.
Momentum is declining, so definitely our market makers are going to be on a hunt for liquidity. Our buyer is still supporting price from falling. We haven't even touched the 54 yet. There we go. Right as I say that, we touch it. We get a response, and our offer comes back in it and throws supply at the market to push lower. Now we've got a fight at the 54 level. Let's watch the supply. So it comes in heavy, and we're seeing a response as price breaks down lower. Again, we get heavy supply to come in to continue to push this price lower. They don't want to keep it up here for too long. But our buyer is still passively supporting the market. Back above 54 we go, as all of that selling is being absorbed. Let's see how our seller responds. They bring more supply in, and they're going for the push. They're now at 54, aggressively pushing the bid. Buyers now holding 51. We've got a note at 51. Huge amount of selling comes in. We're pushing below. Seller at 46, 45 and 3/4, 46. The seller's pushing with volume. They've got the supply. Okay, so if I'm looking at this, because what I wanted to do with this session is we've got one full, as if my memory is correct, but we've got 2 episodes of me just going in on the order flow as it's coming as a constant flow. I kind of want to zoom out a little bit more with my narration and focus kind of on the bigger picture as the order flow's coming in, but where is it coming in terms of the bigger picture? And if you'll remember, we had the CPI news come out, an offer come into the market. We get a huge spread of plus 100 points in price movement. We find a passive buyer that stops price from going lower, and we get a wave of buying come in off of low volume to push price up. We see it's past 87, 875, but that's where I'm looking at a node being printed of where a seller's sitting on the offer. So we get up that high, and we entice buyers to come in off that open move, but since that open move, we've just seen that liquidity be pulled. And as that liquidity is being pulled and the market's starting to go to the short side, it's now rotating. And we found our buyer, and they're now testing the shorts that have just come in after those buyers are tested off of the low volume move following the offer that came in off the CPI news. So that's a lot to follow, but if you slow it down, it's the same thing as the market just moves with the sequence to each of the moves. And I'm kind of my purpose is to illustrate how there's moves. The move being an offer coming in. What's the response? Well, there's a buyer there, passive buyer. And the reason I'm also taking time to go through this is because the sequence is still the same. We've got this passive buyer that's came in after the buying followed the bid to squeeze the shorts after the initial move. Then we had to squeeze the buyers trapped at the higher prices that took the bait on the open coming down. Once the market flips and we get liquidity going to the short side, let's test this. Keep in mind all this is happening with a decrease in volume, except for right now what's happening as those sellers were coming in. Someone stepped in with volume, being our buyer, and they stopped prices from going lower. So what's the response? That's what we're watching now. We've got a buyer at 60 3/4, and they're going for the push. There's an offer now at 64 1/4, moved to 67. Now what's our buyer doing as a response? They're hitting the bid. We've got buy orders coming in, and there's a fight. They're really having to put volume into this for this to continue. But they're continuing it. So as our buyer is still pressing the market, they're shooting the volume into the market. How's the seller responding? We're seeing that with the price action as they're absorbing this liquidity. They're allowing for a couple of those fills to get filled at higher prices and moving it back to where our offer is, 67 3/4. Our buyers responding by, again, on the press, they're still buying. And we're seeing the degrees with the volume and the delta as it comes in. So boom, what's the seller's response? They're absorbing it passively. We can see that with the price action as we come back down to 67 3/4. Price at 65. So this move I'm describing right now with this sprint, it's happening with low volume. Before that, we got an increase in participation as a buyer stopped the selling from going in and squeezed the selling as they lifted up with price. Now as a response, typically I would say the retail mindset is like, oh crap, that just happened, let's go to the buy side. Because this market is very competitive, there's going to be a huge spectrum of participation anticipating just that. And this is the movement as that participation is fighting back and forth for the flow. I'm going to say market makers, basically. They've got the resources to do this.
Yeah, definitely.
So 65 is where our offer is moved down to from 67 3/4, as all that buying from the retail perspective following the move is now being squeezed. Now we're going back down to the previous node of the buyer that came in with high volume. We're testing them now. We did a little tap hello at 59, and we're back at the offer at 65.
And structurally, that last 3-minute move it painted the picture for a push higher. So I would expect a lot of participants to be jumping in long here.
It looks like a long two for me. It's also interesting too because it's structurally it's a long all day.
Yeah.
And with that said, we get a huge amount of buying that came in. It touched the node that's stopping this move right now. So there's a node, I've mentioned it before, 75. It just got tested. When I initially called it out, I said we need to see how it's traded there if we're going to get a buyer to just sling in buy orders to push buy it, or if there's going to be a fight here. But for the moment now, we're seeing buy orders come in. It's not strong on both markets, and I would assume that that's kind of why it's still creepy right now, with the slow big amount of buying coming in, but it's not being reflected in price. Huge amount of buying delta came in, and price did not move to reflect that. Offer at 78, our buyer is still going for it. Now they threw volume big time. That triggered a lot of stops. You can see him come in as delta on the books. Nasty seller response with a huge rejection back down. Buyer able to meet them and push price back to where we are now. Offer at 83 3/4. There's no way in hell I can keep up with price as it's moving, so we're just gonna go with it as it flows. But a lot can happen in just a split second. Offer at 83 halves, 83 1/4. A lot of buying took that. We've got a position here on both markets. It's not as heavy on the NQ side as it is on the MNQ side. Seller's still at 82 3/4 now. We're starting to see kind of price struggle. The only way our buyer's going to get the momentum to continue forward is if they've got supply, because there's an offer sitting here passively 82 3/4.
If our buyers can manage to push price up higher above the high that we just created, there's a nice, from a volume perspective, there's a nice gap all the way up to 915.
Yep, right to that. Oh yeah, they've got the contracts there. It's accumulating, both sides now. My window for execution has now opened up. Following that print of the new minute, we have a huge amount of buying volume that took that opportunity to go long. Let's see the response of our seller. They've moved to 92. They're passively holding the market back now for the moment. How's our buyer going to respond? Currently, we're seeing a fight take place where our offers aggressively selling. They're hitting the bid. And our buyer is having to absorb this. Now we get price to move to 88 3/4. So the battle's going on. Buyers are really having to put up a fight for now. Again, the momentum's, they're holding momentum, but it's not so aggressive. Our buyer hasn't left and our seller hasn't left, so they're fighting. 88.50 is where we're at. Buyers throwing in volume now. They pushed ahead. Sellers are underwater. Let's see if we get the accumulation on both sides. So it's coming in. They're testing the highs of the move and seeing volume come in on both sides. So we're pushing further up. Momentum is still declined though. So our offer is lifted. And it looks like the narrative has still been following the CPI data release. The offer that's come in is that offer that came in aggressively, and we saw the 100-point move. It's just squeezing any sell volume since then. The supply is here, so they're coming to the market with supply, and they're hitting the buy orders, and they're coming in. There is a offer at 97. It's now responded to the fact that there was quite a bit of volume that was accumulating at 14.9, above 14.900. Again, momentum is still declining. So offer is still at 97. We're watching the response of our buyer, seeing that there's an offer at 97. In order to continue higher, we've got to have more supply come into the market or our offer lifts. So that just printed. We've got a node at 97. So are we going to see a continuation on to the buy side? Or is this passive seller going to accumulate to the sell side, or allow more buying volume to come in while they hold the range? Offers now moved to 91 3/4.
Taking a look at volume, a little under 80,000 contracts traded in this 30-minute period. It's
Yeah,
kind
it's
of,
light.
yeah.
It was light on the open, which is interesting because I would expect maybe we'd get more. But maybe a lot of people got caught in the CPI news release. But volume's definitely light for this. So we saw the test of 97. There was slight rejection. We're still watching the response take place now as the offer comes back to 91 3/4. And as we touch that, our buyers trying to respond by pushing it higher or fighting for control of that price. Momentum still declining, both markets. Buyers finding enough support and supply to continue the push. We're testing 97 again. Boom. Get a huge amount of contracts and buy orders to push through 97. They're still our passive sellers still holding its offer. Let's see if we get more orders. The orders are starting to pile up. Big sling of a couple hundred contracts, and we're pushing past the offer. We're continuing the momentum to the upside. Huge amounts of volume coming in to push, but it's not really being reflected in price. Our sellers got to control kind of pace of it. They're controlling the pace of it. From my perspective, it's not reflecting the volume we're seeing come in. Even though it's low volume, again, because it's low volume, it should be moving through price. Unless we've got someone very passively, controllingly with their hand on the momentums. Offer at 905 1/4. Waiting to see the buyer's response to this, as a lot of buying got absorbed there. Now at 902. Most of the selling, most of the buying that came in, about a quarter of it is absorbed right now by price. So there's a lot of buyers who bought the top that are going to be in a tense position as our sellers move to 903 and price is falling. In terms of the order flow on both sides of the market, we're seeing sellers accumulate taking that bait, and we're now seeing a buyer respond to that by stopping price from moving at 900. Now to 9, they're going back. So we're at 900 again. 903 quarters. Our offer's at 905 and a quarter. Our buyer's at 903 quarters. Momentum is still declining. Just got a huge amount of volume to come into the buy side again. We've pushed through our offer. Let's see if our offer is going to hold the offer. They're still holding. Let's see if the contracts come to the buy side. They come. They're piling in. Again, we're getting the flow to come in, but again, from my perspective, we're seeing it very controlled as we continue to move higher. So pretty much the whole CPI move has been retraced.
Mm-hmm.
So from a market maker perspective, boom, we turned the page on the move. So that program is just completed. Hopefully no one's still holding shorts from taking that bait.
From a market sentiment standpoint, I could imagine it looks like the price action that we're seeing now kind of gives us evidence of this, that there will be a lot of sellers sitting at the top of that 830 move, that CPI move, just waiting for another chance to take it lower. And then our market makers are taking advantage of that and using that to keep pushing this market higher.
Right, exactly. I tend to agree with that perspective, and just putting it out there, I show that move, the offer is sitting at 1350 is where they're holding the front wall, and it can stretch as high. It's going as far back as 918 and a quarter. So in between there, I anticipate to see our sellers begin to get aggressive to protect it or completely get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Buying hasn't stopped, so our buying hasn't stopped. Our momentum is still declining. Let's see if we get anything to change here. Our buyer's note is sitting at 910. Huge amount of buying contracts come out. We're seeing our passive seller show up to stop that because it's not being reflected by price really. 914 and a quarter is where our seller is, moved to 915. We've got a couple of nodes here that they could be finding support by other participants. We are inside the offer from the open. Well, not the open, but the CPI data release. 14 and 3/4 is where our offer is hanging out, as they've got price stopped for the moment and our buyers have to respond. Starting to see them throw supply into the market again. And here we go.
Looking for the response if we make it to the session high. Is that at 927? 927 and a half?
Yep, that's right. 927 abs. So a lot of buying came in off of that move as they continued their pattern or program of this low volume squeeze, kind of how it's moving structurally in sequence. They went for a continuation here, but our offer at 915 has been able to absorb all of the buying that came in, and we're looking at lower prices. And as we're looking at lower prices, what I'm looking for is the response of our buyer who's absorbing and eating some of this liquidity as it's getting trapped to the low side. and kind of squeezing it by a couple of ticks. We're also starting to see an increase in momentum on the retail side. It hasn't quite picked up yet on the institution side. Our buyer is protecting their node at 910, trying to move it back up to 915. We wait till the next new rotation to swing about 350 contracts just straight to the buy side. Seller has to respond. We're getting the flow to come in again to the buy side. So that's printed, and our offer shifted slightly. Let's see if they're going to just break through everything. The supply is here. The contracts are coming.
Push strongly through that.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the response at another key level of 937.
And we're at all-time highs. Is that right? Is this where we are right now? I'm looking left, and yeah,
Yep.
this is all-time high. Offer at 930. Underwater. The moment I say that, we get several hundred contracts to the buy side. Again, they're just coming with the contracts. The flow is coming. Now we've got an increase in participation. A lot of liquidity is found up here to the buy side. And it is not stopping. We just got another sling of about a couple hundred contracts to the buy side. Interestingly, we moved back to the offer at 930 with that move. It moved to 31 and a quarter.
If I'm not mistaken, we saw something similar yesterday where they pushed price into new all-time highs like drastically and then immediately just brought it back within the range.
Yeah, just ate all that liquidity and ran the next program sequence to just get more money.
Mm-hmm. They're trying to hold this one.
It appears so. I'm more quiet because I'm watching. Because from my perspective, our offer is still 31 and a quarter. Yeah, we've got a buyer and the buying is accumulating, but just watching the price action and the flow, our offer hasn't left, and they've still got their hand on price. Now that just printed. This is the response here. It's already to a creepy set. So turn the page. How do you respond? We're seeing a huge decrease in momentum. It's almost half. So they're really watching closely how this next move goes out. Offer at 34 and 34 halves. Our buyer is sitting 31 and a quarter. So we've got price between 34 halves, 34 and a quarter, and 31 and a quarter, where our buy and seller is sitting. With creepy low volume and momentum, given the move that just happened and us being at all-time highs. So once we get that touch of the bid, 31 and a quarter, there was a huge sling of supply that came in, just plopped it down. We're now at 27 and 3/4, 27. We're starting to see the offers pile up and accumulate on both sides. Not necessarily heavy considering the move that just happened, but depending on how far we get, it also gives perspective into who's controlling price and what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
by allowing price to just free flow. So already we're seeing a nice bit of movement happen from our offer that printed at 34 and a quarter. We're down to 25. So almost 10 points just passively as our buyers lifted the bid and allowed for these sellers to come and accumulate. What we're seeing now is a response from our buyers. They're absorbing these sellers as prices going down. So our seller has to continue the push and come with volume, which we're starting to see now. And our buyer has to respond. How are they going to play with that? Are they going to allow? Because if I'm really the buyer, I want to get the best price. And if the seller's here, well, come on. We
Mm-hmm.
get to see their psychology of how they're going to allow that to go by being in control of the bid. So our buyer's at 28 now, and they've absorbed most of the aggressive selling that took the bait there. We're coming back to their original node, 931 and a quarter. So we saw 31 and a quarter. We've got a string of offers to come in that's pushed us back down to where our buyer's being pushed at 28. Our buyer's defending 28. And what we're witnessing now is our kind of our most aggressive offer response since we've seen this squeeze to the upside following the open. And our seller now has to respond if they're really going for it, because it's situated for our buyers to continue the move. How are our sellers going to respond to this? Our offer is sitting at 32 now. Our bid is at 28. It's being tested. We're seeing an accumulation of offers on both sides of the market. They've got to push. We're starting to see it sling in, but our buyers got full control over price. They've defended 28. We get a slight rotation up. Offers come back with contracts. We're back at 28. We're in between 30 where the offer is and 28 where our buyer is. Buyers pushing into the offer and absorbing all of the volume. The institution side has gone bid. They're flipping back. So it's a lot more tamed over there, as the main battle I'm describing is happening in MNQ,
Mm-hmm.
as the sellers are being absorbed pretty easily by our passive buyer from my perspective watching the flow. But it all could be a show, and our seller could just be accumulating a position, and which we'll begin to see that happen more so as time moves forward. So our buyer comes in big time, and they've completely squeezed out those sellers who took the bait for lower prices. Now, how's our offer responding? They're stopping it by absorbing the buying. So we've got the battle continuing. Our offers now move to 32. Bid still at 28. Now, on MNQ, I've noticed my point of control has moved up to 930. So we're seeing a lot of volume take place up here. Great. It's a great sign for a predator algorithm. Sellers are accumulating. They're going for the push of 28 again. Let's see how our buyer responds. He's allowing price to go down, or they're allowing price to go down. They're still holding the bid though. Institution side is still buying, even though retail is heavily short. Just flip. Huge amount of contracts and supply to the downside. It looks like we're building a position on low volume to the short side.
Mm-hmm.
Our offer is at 930 where the point of control is. We're seeing a huge amount of selling now continue. Price reflect that. A buyer steps in at 919, absorbs all the selling we just saw for a slight positive look on the bar. And now we've got a battle at 921. Are we going to continue to go down, or is our buyer going to hold price here? Looking at the positioning, our market is positioned short. And we're starting to see lower prices. Our buyers moved to 919. Our seller has not gone anywhere. They're still bringing supply to the market. We're now at 17, 16. Offers at 19 and a quarter. Buyers having to respond. Lots of now supplies coming to the market.
Just watching at this point, we do have volume dropping off at 911. Just looking at our volume profile.
Mm-hmm. So for this move we're witnessing is it's mostly sellers participating in the market and going short, and we're seeing our buyer absorb all of the selling even as the sellers are accumulating. They're holding price. The bid's at 919. They've managed to squeeze price all the way to 26, so a lot of sellers got trapped on that one. As our buyer is moving up the price ladder, 930 is going to be a big test if we can get that high, because our sellers are still accumulating and haven't lifted. Buyers having to defend that move that he just took by showing up, supporting the market and eating those offers that came in, squeezing them. Another seller showed up and stopped it from going higher. Our buyers now responding to this, and we've got a battle taking place. Our sellers they were still accumulating, but within the last seconds of that minute here, we're seeing the buyer really hit the go button. We're seeing buy orders come back in. We just saw the 930 get tested and rejected pretty strongly, as all those buyers going for the bid continue to move higher are now being tested. Looking up above, our buyers now supporting the market with a node at 922. I'd expect us to get some more perspective as to what's going to happen next by how they play price there. We've just got a touch there. Our offers hasn't lifted. There's slinging supply in. Our buyers responding by attempting to grab it, and they're eating the liquidity as our seller is still selling. They're holding the 922. Our seller is still selling. They're having to absorb a lot of buying volume offers here. Our buyer is still supporting the 922. They've showed up now at 22 and a quarter, moved down to 21 3/4. Buyers still here. They've absorbed quite a bit of selling. They're supporting the move. Let's see how our seller responds. I'm not seeing much of a response yet, other than they're holding the offer. Now we're seeing contracts come in. They're starting to position as prices getting higher to the offer side. Our sellers now moved to 28, so they're defending 28. They're accumulating off of it. On the institution side, they're buying. Our buyers trying to go for it to trap these sellers and squeeze them, but if our offer is really positioning here, they're going to use this liquidity as a way to get into their position.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to sit on this liquidity as it's coming in to the buy side. And they're accumulating to the short side on the retail side. The institution side is buying. Now they're both buying.
Structurally, it is setting up for another push long, but I'm not saying the follow through that I would expect.
And it's tough to it's going to be more difficult to see as volumes declining as they've got a handle on it like we're seeing today. So that printed, our buyer was able to run a great profitable program by enticing the sellers on lower prices, getting a lot of sell volume to come in at the highs here and just squeeze them up as volume was declining. But we're still in the offer, and our seller still is responding to this. Now at 34 and a quarter. The market is buying on both sides, by the way. All right, I anticipate that we'll see a lot of contracts swung into this here. And there it goes, it happened. Huge amounts of volume and delta reflected on both markets, but I'm not seeing this big price movement to reflect it. Nevertheless, we are moving higher. Our offer is still holding the offer also. 942 is where our offer is sitting, our seller passively. Price now at 36, 37, 36 and a quarter. Lots of buyers are positioned. Boom. We just saw aggressive seller come in at 37 to 36 range across multiple prices. They're doing it again. They've now moved the offer to 36 from 42. Our buyers having a response. So they've got supply. So they're able to maintain this. Our seller has still managed to protect the offer for the time being as it's being squeezed now because our buyers still got control. Just got a response from the sellers. They're pushing it back down, eating this buying liquidity now at 37 and a quarter. They protected their offer. One thing to note on this move that we're witnessing that's about to print is on the institution side in Q. There was a huge amount of buying that came into that move as we saw higher prices, but the market completely flipped negative as that offer showed up. So that's either fuel for a good squeeze or again, possibly a position. They're just building a position here short. They've held it.
Interesting how that printed at my balance level of 937. It closed above it, but now we're immediately selling back under it. I can still see this market going in either direction, just looking at the price action and how this
really
is printing.
could. They've got such control over price. They could take it either any direction and be okay. So, and I haven't got a setup yet. So these are the days where I can't get anything, and mostly because we don't have participation in the market like we normally do. The real flow that's where there's a competitive back and forth. This is well, this is a program specifically. I'm not going to talk about it too much. Doesn't matter.
I haven't gotten any real setups after that first trade I took.
So our buyers are going for the attempt. We're seeing a lot of volume being conducted here in these price range 40, what is it, 38 up to 43. Offers at 40 halves. Momentum has declined on both sides. You know, I mentioned that on the institution side, NQ saw a huge amount of buying that came in and just completely flipped. They all left. Well, we're seeing now on this response to it, just there's no follow through on either side. So again, as we were saying, that they could take it either way. They're holding the throttle, or they're going either way. Currently, they're in the bid. It looks like we should get a sling of contracts here. Each time we should get it, we're seeing the offer respond and prices go lower. That could be a tell. Offer at 38.50, now 39 3/4, 40. So we're starting to see volume show up here to we're getting a fight here. Someone's in disagreement. Point of control for NQ has now moved up to here. So again, as we saw before, it's setting up for a good predator possible squeeze. Okay, that printed. So we saw volume decline, and our positioning went to the sell side on MNQ. On NQ, volume decline, and we got a slight increase in buyers coming in. Like this is a great setup for a market maker who's on both sides of price. It appears they've got this battle contained, and it appears they could take it either way. So we're seeing buying come in. It looks like we're going to have a test of this offer again. Is this offer going to let it come through, or is this the position happening and building? The volume's up here, and definitely in range on both markets. Offer at 38 1/4.
On a 3-minute perspective, that last candle printed as an inside candle pair. So I'm interested to see how it breaks out of here.
On the institution side, they're getting heavy on the buy side, and it's being stopped here. Let's see, as we get higher, let's see if we get it to swing in. I'm not seeing the response that we should see. In fact, the exact opposite is happening as they get aggressive on the offer at 39 1/2. What are the buyers going to do as response? I'm seeing the tape light up blue. Here we go. And again, as I say here we go, we get a yank down from the offer, 42. I'm just saying this also for myself to look back, because these are tells. 39 halves is where our offer is sitting now. Alright, buyers are responding. Move to 42. Here we go. This is where we should see it. Let's see what happens. Let's go. Okay, and the response is we've got an offer that comes in. Offer at 42. As I say that, buyers ready to go. They're pushing it up. Let's see. Offers at 42. What are we going to do? Offers at 42. Our buyers holding the market. What are we going to do? Here we go. We should get the slinging to come in. Let's go. Where's the flow? I can see a seller being printed to stop it, but the price, our buyers holding it.
Still trying.
$42, and our offer still held it. All right, buyers are going for it again. Here it is. This is the moment. Let's go. Let's go. Here it is. We got a little bit of contracts to flow in on that, but it printed at the, so we've got another rotation. So they're really, really being sophisticated with the flow in this. I'm not seeing what I would want to see to be a breakout trader, but also too, it's not necessarily negative.
Right.
especially with where the market is now, you could be anticipating this kind of action for higher prices. But what just printed is an aggressive amount of buyers take that, and their position long right here. Their 42 level is where most of that volume came in at. It's being protected. Here we go. Let's see. We should get a sling of volume to come in and push price higher. Not necessarily seeing that. Here we go. There it is. There's the delta. We're seeing the volume. But what I'm also seeing too is they've got this weird thing with price where they're really putting control on it, as it's not reflecting the flow that just came in. Seller at 48 and a quarter and moved it all the way down to 42, and absorbing the hell out of a lot of buying that took that bait on the retail side, not as heavy on the institution side. So after we test the buyer at 42 again, we're back into the bid, coming more with more size. Now we got the flow coming. Heavy on both sides now. All right, and then now we're just up. What do they say? We're going to the moon.
Yeah.
This is what inflation looks like, by the way. When your dollar isn't worth shit and it just continues, whatever market you're based in and you're using dollars, it's going to be reflected in that market.
Exactly. All right, well, that was exciting. Watching that breakout. But that's going to go ahead and conclude today's session.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Another good one.
It's definitely a good one.
Value for everyone.
Yep. All right. Trade it easy.
Yep. See you guys. All right, man. Good luck. See you next week. Maybe we can. I'll probably want to